This is part two of our study of biblical creationism. In this episode, we'll be looking at various evangelical views of the creation account. Now, we'll have a chart here showing 8 different views that are espoused by various evangelicals today, running from the more literal to the less literal. Now, all of this that I'm about to show you is available in a handout number 3, which is a chart on the evangelical views of the creation account. The first view that we'll look at is the young earth view. This is what we might call the traditional view. In this, God created everything a few thousand years ago in 6 consecutive 24-hour days, with the first day starting at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Verse 2 depicts the earth simply in its initial incomplete stage, before God formed and filled heaven and earth from verse 3 and onward. Now, this view is espoused today by John Whitcomb, Terry Mortensen, Todd Beale, William Barrick, John MacArthur, the Ministry of Answers in Genesis, as well as the ministry of the Institute of Creation Research. Of course, there are others too that would take this view, but these are just a few of the more well-known names. A second view is the gap theory. According to this view, there's a long gap of time, perhaps even billions of years, between an original creation in Genesis 1, verse 1, and a judged earth that's depicted in verse 2. So there's a gap of time between those first 2 verses. And this is followed by a new recreation in 6 literal days, starting at verse 3. Now, according to them, this gap could be millions or even billions of years. This view was espoused in the past by George H. Pember, Harry Rimmer, and in a book by Arthur Custance, and it was also affirmed by the Scofield Reference Bible, which gave it some degree of popularity in earlier years. Today, however, not too many evangelical scholars adhere to this view because of various weaknesses to it. A third view is the pre-creation chaos theory. In this view, Genesis 1 verse 1 is not a stage of creation itself, but rather a summary statement for the whole chapter. Then verse 2 depicts the earth negatively. That is, it's not by the hand of God. Something wrong has happened, without saying that the cause of that might be. Then in verse 3, we have the start of a new creation, which implies a previous creation many years in the past, perhaps even millions or billions of years. Now, this view was advocated by the Old Testament scholar Bruce K. Walke and followed by Alan P. Ross, both of whom at one point were at Dallas Theological Seminary, but not today. A fourth view is the Promised Land view. In this view, Genesis 1:1 is the creation of the entire universe over millions, perhaps even billions of years. And then verse 3 and following describes God's work to prepare the Promised Land. Now, this view was espoused by John H. Selhammer, especially in his book Genesis Unbound. A revised edition came out in 2011. It's also embraced today by John Piper, pastor. A fifth view is the old earth views. In this category, we see the idea is that millions of years were involved in the 6-day creation week. So they don't take the days as being literal 24-hour days. There are a couple of variations of this view. First, the day-age view. In this, each day represents millions of years, not 24-hour days. A slightly different view, but it's what's called the intermittent day-age view. In this, a day is a 24-hour day, but there's millions of years between each day of creation. In general, the day-age view has been held by quite a few Old Testament scholars, such as Gleason Archer, Walter Kaiser, as well as other popular teachers, Millard Erickson, J.P. Moreland, and is held by the Ministry of Reasons to Believe, headed up by Hugh Ross. A sixth view is the figurative day views. In this, it relies very heavily on literary analysis and takes the days of the week figuratively. So there's what we call the framework view. The days are not 24-hour days, nor are they sequential, but they're used to convey theology. So according to this view, the whole passage has a structure to it in which the first 3 days parallel the second 3 days, and because of having that structure to it, it's thought not to be literal or sequential. And there's a couple of variants to this: the literary day view, held by Richard E. Everbeck, and the analogical day view, held by C. John Collins. We'll look at those more in detail in the next episode. But in general, the framework view was espoused by Meredith G. Klein, an Old Testament professor, is held by Henry Blocker, Lee Irons, Mark Futato, and also by Bruce K. Walke. So we see Dr. Walke's name here on 2 different places, but sometimes there is a combination of various aspects of these views. A 7th view is the cosmic temple view. Now this one differs greatly from all the others because in this view, Genesis 1 through 2 is not even about material creation. Rather, it's about God giving function to pre-existing things. And supposedly cosmic space is prepared as his temple within which he will rule. Now he comes to this conclusion based upon the comparison of ancient Near Eastern literature in comparison to the Bible. The main one espousing this view is John H. Walton, a professor of Old Testament at Wheaton College. And lastly, there is the view of theistic evolution, combining the idea of evolution with the idea that ultimately God was behind it. So God supposedly used natural processes, namely evolution, to create everything, for example, the stars, the earth, plants, animals, and man. And he did this over billions of years. Now, many of those who take this view, though not everyone, sees Genesis as an allegory and even denies a historical Adam and Eve. Some of the representatives of this view today would be Francis Collins, whose book we mentioned in the previous episode, The Language of God. But he's also followed by Peter Enns, Tremper Longman, N.T. Wright, Howard J. Van Til, again Bruce K. Walke, and the Ministry of Biologos. So as we look over these 8 different views, what makes for such a difference among evangelicals? Well, broadly speaking, I'd like to suggest that there's 3 key factors. The first is how they understand the relationship of the first 3 verses to one another. That is, what is the syntactical relationship of one verse to another? Secondly, is how they handle the exegesis of various details throughout Genesis 1 and 2. And third, the extent to which they employ a literal hermeneutic. In the following episodes to this, I will take each one of these 3 things and look at them in more detail, so it'll hopefully help us come to a good and biblical view of the creation account. So there we have it. There's your 8 evangelical views of the creation account that are somewhat popular today, some more so, of course, than others. In the next episode, part 3, we'll be looking at the contemporary views of Genesis 1, verses 1 to 3.